Hi all. As you can see, I've been in the wars. I managed to have a coughing fit. I don't know if I lost oxygen and fainted and bashed my head, or if I bashed my head as my chair slipped out, but I woke up on the floor the other night. All that aside, I've been looking at one or two parcels which people say have not been delivered. Most of them have been. There's one which I'm aware of seems to have been lost, and we'll reship that. Free of charge, which is our normal policy. Tariffs. We as a company are not changing our prices because of some other government putting a tariff in. That's between that government and the recipient. We don't control that, and we're not about to do discounts because of it, because the price is the price. We're not asking for more money from somebody who's got a pre-order with us. We have raised pre-order prices quite dramatically just around Christmas, as far as I understand. That takes it in line with the massive increases in costs that we have here. We are also delaying any potential price rise due to shipping costs or whatever, having gone up quite dramatically in the last 6 months, until such times we know what's happening. Because if we can find a way to ameliorate things for our clientele, we will do it. If people have problems financially and they want to buy some games or whatever, please email us. We will look at what we can do to make that a bit more affordable, even if it means splitting payments up into equal payments or whatever that they can afford. I think that's fair. The deal in that is if you don't pay us and you've paid a part off it, we keep the money, because we could have sold those games to someone else. But you're effectively an interest-free credit, which you don't get anywhere else easily, certainly these days. Work-wise, I spent most of yesterday feeling ill, as you can imagine. I think a concussion. Bit better today, so we have looked into some shipping problems. I'm hoping we can resolve one or two. We've got a couple of things outstanding that we need to ship, which will go over the weekend. So at the end of this week, we'll be doing some shipping. People will get notification as usual. If you've got outstanding orders, we'll be looking them up, plug them in the shipping list as the week goes on. So everything's normal. We've been very busy. Huge amount of work in the house. You would be amazed at what we have achieved. We need to do a bit more pre-prep before we put the house on the market, but it will be getting sold soon. We're also about to deal with the print problems we had before Christmas. That's going to be expensive for them and not for us, because I'm not prepared to tolerate what we had to put up with. 6 months of delays due to, frankly, nothing we could do to improve the matter. People forcibly trying to change contract conditions, that kind of thing. All of that is actually illegal, and I won't tolerate it. We've done our level best to get stuff out. Jeff has sent me some stuff for Las Malvinas. I'll be reviewing that with him in the next couple of days. I need to book a call with him because I know he is busy most days, but we'll get some time and we'll get that sorted. I still need to do some ship ratings, but I will look at them probably with Jeff to make sure he's happy with where we're going with it, because he's done the primary development of it. Once we get that, we can do artwork. It won't take too long. The game will have 4 counter sheets as far as I can tell, because we're doing company-sized assets. And frankly, there's 2 divisional units, a lot of counters there. Aircraft are going to be a couple of planes per flight. Makes a lot of sense given the small scale of conflict to zoom it in a lot. There's a couple hundred ships involved in total. I think the task force with the support elements 150 ships, and the Argentine Navy is 40 or 50 ships in total. So you might as well get them all. Submarines will be individual. So that's looking quite good. In terms of World War I, I do need a chat with Corey, and I keep saying that, and I keep not managing to get time to phone him. That said, it's looking like we can do it with existing OLI data for the most part and generate the TLIs from that, which then converts to the game number. The only thing we might change from World War II in terms of that is the divisor. And that's largely because in World War II, a lot of units have some extra additional firepower assets that were not available in World War I. So your typical German division might have 36 75mm anti-tank guns towards the end of the war. That's a big chunk of change in terms of the way it rates. In World War I, they don't have that. And obviously that we need to look at granularity. We need to show the change from 1914 up to 1918, because firepower does improve, But a lot of the firepower changes and things like machine guns, rather than, which don't rate hugely in the game system, an artillery piece might be 150 points up, a machine gun's between 1 and 5 points. So I think you can understand that when we're plugging that into the system, it works really well in terms of combat output, but you kind of look at it and think, wait a minute, depending on the circumstance, that machine gun should be more powerful. So we need to do a little bit of tweaking possibly to the rule to make it work a bit better there. What we might do is break out machine gun companies or whatever into separate battalions and give them a plus up. That's one of the things that we have done in World War II with some special forces, and that's a special asset, if you like, in the First World War. Fairly minor detail, but rating for that shouldn't be a big deal. I mean, we know, and essentially a 1914 division's a 6 or 7 or an 8, which is not far off of World War II if you sit and think about it. Especially if you've got the early Blitzkrieg, we'll see quite a lot of stuff in that kind of price range, if you like, there. So I'm not too concerned about that. Ships is just plugging numbers into a spreadsheet. It's a bit of a pain, but it can be done. At that point, I'm relatively confident we can get the game out pretty quickly. Where that becomes an issue is we will be moving house. And we've done a month worth of pre-prep for that. That has involved decluttering, moving stuff, decorating every room, cleaning carpets. We need to do some stuff in the garden. That's not too big a deal, but we need to fix our garage and our attic, which at the moment are unusable. That's a polite way of putting it. And I can't do it till this is better, on medical advice. Anyway, the weather's not conducive to doing much for sitting here, so I'm going back to the mapping project. For those of you who are concerned about that wasting time or whatever, it's not a waste of time getting stuff consistent. At the moment, the Blitzkrieg maps are totally different. They're actually on a slightly different projection with different hex numbering. There's a different way the city sizes were calculated to what we've done in every game since, mainly because we didn't have the data source that we've got now. Now, the updated mapping for Blitzkrieg will take all of that into account. It's largely been done. There's a few add-ins that we need to do there, and a lot of that is just plugging in stuff that you see in the C-zone maps, not stuff in Europe. Europe is largely done. We may, and it's this one year I haven't made up my mind where it's going yet, Mare Nostrum might get, or Blitzkrieg might get stuff like the Azores and Tenerife, the Canary Islands and Madeira, as mini maps, the kind of thing we did with Wake Island. The reason we're looking at doing it that way is really the British intended if Gibraltar fell, taking one or more of those island groups and basing naval and air assets there to protect convoys to the UK and to enable a short hop counter-amphibious assault into the Gibraltar area to reopen the Straits of Gibraltar. That was the simple plan. The assets used, we've got 101 and 102 Marine Brigades, which are part of the never fully formed 1st Marine Division from the Royal Marines. That is an optional unit in Blitzkrieg, and I think bits of it show up in a couple other games. So, you know, we can do that. It's pretty easy. It's just what game I put it in. I also need to map those areas. It won't take long. It's not hard. Plugging in all the data for the ports and so on for the C-zone maps. Please note that is the whole of North America have to do. Canada is about 50–60% done. The USA has not yet been touched, but it's just a numbers game that you sit and plugging it in. A lot of typing and a lot of clicking, but nothing too onerous. I'm also, when we did Day of Infamy, I really was ill. I'd been gassed, carbon monoxide poisoning and all that. So I don't know how many years ago that is now. Just take a look at the copyright notice on it. That's the year it released. The DOI map's actually been done on the wrong map. It's the right projection, so all the hex numbers and all that are fine. So it's just a case of copying the data from that map onto the one that's got I Shall Return, Watchtower and Singapore on it. And that is 85% done. I was doing that when I did this. Once I get that done, I can complete the map of the Philippines and then look at China. Now, I want to get the Philippines done because Dennis is kind of pushing for me to get off my dime with that, because I know he's really close with stuff, and I think it'd be useful for him to have it. Bob Vale, our head programmer, is also pushing really hard to get hold of the global map data as far as possible. Now, the reason he wants that is when he's programming the game software, he's doing a slightly different export to the one that I would use to create your board games. It'll look basically the same, but it doesn't have some of the information, but it's got a lot of other information that we need to plug into so that the game knows where the starts are for units which are fixed, that kind of thing. Now, all of that comes out of the editor, but he wants to do a global one, and then we can split up into the individual games that you're going to buy as standalone items or downloadable content. That said, the idea is essentially you get the download, install the software, then you reveal it, if you like, or can gain access to the stuff. But that means either way, whether we do it that way or whether you get the whole map in one massive computer game, which would be a lot more expensive for us to sell you, it doesn't really matter what we would do. Bob still needs to know the total amount of data he's going to be dealing with so he can look at the most cost-effective system load-wise solution to your game on your PC or your Mac. Now, to clear up any confusion, he's using Net9. I have no idea what that is. He's a programmer, I'm not, which means he can port it into Mac. He can shove it onto a PC. He can run it in Linux, as far as I'm aware. And I believe you can whack it into games consoles, potentially. Although why you'd want to put this on a PS5 or an Xbox is kind of beyond me, but it's not that kind of a game, I don't think. But I know you can get a mouse, and I know you can get a keyboard and plug it into these things. It'd be a whole lot easier playing them that way. But that's really up to you guys. In terms of system architecture, system load, and sort of like the cost, as it were, for PC to play it, you know what? The idea is you can run it in integrated graphics at the moment. It shouldn't be too heavy. What we've done with the editor is doing an awful lot of math. You don't realise just how much work there is involved in getting a map game ready. In one very small bit of China, for example, there's about 24 different coastline distortions, we call them, just changing the coastline to fit along hex grids. That causes the graphics card to do 17,000 triangle changes per second till I stop mucking with it. So you're looking at millions of triangles getting changed all over the map. I'm led to believe Europe is 6 million triangles, which is kind of interesting when that number does not in fact include any of the terrain textures, which obviously are millions more triangles. So you can appreciate that we run on high-end workstation grade machines with very high-end graphics, very high-end processors. The idea within the game is to make that a lot less system intensive. So hopefully something fairly basic, will run it. We're obviously watching things very intently with changes in hardware and whatever, and we're also aware that with the end of Windows 10 coming up, most people will be in Windows 11 or will have ported over to Linux or possibly onto Mac. So we do need to make sure all of those systems will run the code. We can do almost all of that within our businesses. Bob owns Macs as well as PCs. He needs to, so he can make sure software works properly in each platform. So don't worry too much about that. We have no immediate release date in mind for the computer code because he's only just got it displaying properly the coastline of Europe. That doesn't mean, oh wow, that's really impressive. Yes, it is, because you can scroll the map about and you can zoom it in and zoom it out, and it works just fine. Unfortunately, no textures are there. There's no hex grid there yet. All of that needs to be coded. Once he gets that done, he needs that map that I was talking about, and he's probably a week or two away from getting that done. So in about a fortnight's time, he would really appreciate me having these big map files with pretty much every piece of data you can have. And the biggest map of all in terms of the data set is clearly Europe, because we've gone, from beyond the Urals all the way down to Mombasa in Kenya, and then all the way across to Spain and all the way up to the North Cape. So it's a huge map, and it's only going to get bigger as the map to West Africa. That will give him the data set he requires, and it gives him something that's a top end. Well, you need all of this to run it. How we're going to link theatres we haven't looked at. If anyone's got any bright ideas, ping us a message, please. I'm pretty sure we've got a way to do it. It's just we need to make that happen. And the other thing to remember is currently we're using the game maps as the source for this. That enables us to do things within the editing software we have that tells the computer game what countries which, what cities have attached to them, what ports do, and the different sizes of the ports and all that kind of thing. If we need to get that correct, and we need to have that happen in such a way that it's seamless for you guys, and the editor is the key. So we've also been spending a lot of time and effort, and actually quite a lot of money in real terms, to get the editor working properly. And the functionality we've put into that now is very impressive. The next stage is a combination of stuff that I would like to make my life easier, which he's been doing a lot of, and also an automation process to take our published orders of battle, suck them into a database, and create essentially a massive file which really then runs all the different games out of that file. And that does 3 or 4 different things. One for the paper games, which I'm sure you're really interested in, is if we do it right, and we can then attach it to a bit of code that generates the artwork, for most assets in the game, it can actually just generate a counter sheet with everything in the right position, so it can be printed by the people we get to print the counter sheets, can be die cut and all that kind of jazz. So it prints that out, and it will also give us essentially a PDF file, not so much of the actual image, obviously that's something that it does, but also of the location on it. So if you're looking for the 1st Infantry Division belonging to whatever country, you'll know that it's counter sheet 12. On the left-hand column, 3 blocks down, halfway across the centre, towards the centre from the left-hand side in the top row. So if you can't find it, it will tell you it's there, and it will at the very least mean that any error in the OB is the only error we have in the artwork. So gone will hopefully be the days in due course where I have to use CorelDRAW or Illustrator and design whatever piece of software I care to use to generate all the artwork from OBs, try and fix anything that people have found in the OB that's wrong, and then try and work out if it's fixed in the counter sheet. And obviously, if you're doing something like Barbarossa, there's almost 8,000 counters in the game, you will make the odd error. You go snowblind. I think I fixed 300 plus errors before the game went out the door. Bulk of Fury I picked up about 50. And I'm sure we've probably got the odd error there after press. So there's always something we miss. And the idea behind our plug everything through the editor, everything through the text file, then into a database within the editing tool, and then suck all of that and put it in the computer game, is even if we have a minor error, it's consistent across all products, and we fix one, it fixes them all. So you will get patches in the computer code, and that's all pretty cool. It's a very flexible way of doing it. We hope this is a really good idea, but we need to get the mapping right. We need to get the mapping tools right, and then we also need to obviously get the game displaying that correctly. Once we get it displaying it, we've got the information required within the map to then inform the computer software of where, I don't know, the Sympathizer divisions in various regiments are in Greece prior to the invasion, the airdrop in Greece, the invasion of Crete rather. That again is really important that we get that right, because then we can implement the mechanics, which are there in the older code. To some extent, we can suck them out, plug them in, and one of the things that we're doing is we're creating independent libraries for each different class of software item. Now that's again not the case currently. It's a bit of a mess. So by tearing it apart and putting it back together again like this, which is a bit of a slow process, we are getting more effective code, and we're also getting to a point where if something goes wrong, or if we're creating something, we're only editing or amending one bit. We're not looking at all this massive data and trying to work out what we need to change. So that's an ongoing process. It does absorb a bit of time from me, but not as much as you might think. Watchtower. Because of the festive season, because of Las Malvinas, because of the requirement to sort out the house and because of the requirements to try and ship games to people. I put a break in that. Bob's asked me for this stuff. It all kind of goes together. Some of the Watchtower mapping that we're using is slightly out of date in terms of C zones. We're tweaking that as I go through it. Once we get that done, I'll go back in, I'll finish off the Japanese. That's really the bit that's doing my head in at the moment with that. Get them sorted out, get them into the file. Obviously, that's good news because that file will also drive I Shall Return and Kamikaze. So at that point there, once we get that, we get it all plugged together, suck the data in for the US Army and the Australian Army and so on. We have all of that in hand, the New Zealanders and whatever else is kicking about. There's I think one Dutch brigade, a Marine unit. There's not an awful lot other than that. There's an odd Royal Navy ship I need to find until the Pacific Fleet turns up, and it's on and off map. It doesn't do much on map, so we don't really need it. In this game, it's already in Singapore anyway, and I can do a little thing which tells you what to do with the Singapore counters if you got them. So that's Watchtower. It's not that big a deal, but it's a big game to get right. There's an awful lot of scenarios that we need to generate. So even once I get the OBs in place and generate the counters, I also have to sit and generate the various starts that we need for that title. Now, we've spoken about that on and off in public. I'm going to hit you with some naval ones that we want to do. Obviously, we're going to have Coral Sea, which just can't paste out a DOI. It was kind of a taster for it. But we'll do a bit more detail about it. We'll put it actually on the maps instead of just something you can use the C-zone map for. The next one that we're going to do is we'll take a look at what if the Japanese have been really serious about taking Port Moresby. So that's Coral Sea, but on steroids. And at that point there, the Americans will be rolling to see if they get Enterprise as well as Lexington and Yorktown. Because you'll need them. If Kirubitai is there pretty much in strength, you will need all those three carriers to have any chance. We will look at Eastern Solomons, Santa Cruz, the various battles around Guadalcanal, so whether it's Savoy Island or whatever, Cape Esperance and all that kind of stuff, they'll all be there. We'll also do Tassaparonga, we'll do Empress Augusta Bay, and we'll look at one or two of the smaller naval engagements where the US Navy by that point was learning and was actually doing pretty well later on in 1943. We're also going to plug in, obviously, Operation Watchtower itself, the invasion of Guadalcanal as a mini campaign, if you like. We'll do the Kokauda Trail, and then we can look at some of the invasions of places like Hollandia and whatnot. One that I do feel we should look at in some detail is the disaster in Bougainville when the Australians take over and basically try and kick the Japanese off an island. They've been bypassed. That's one I think for Australian clients might be quite interesting. We can also look at whether or not Cartwheel could have taken Rabaul. As we know, it was bypassed, but that's something we can look at. And we've got various other amphibious assaults and some ground stuff that we can do. In terms of an air-only campaign, I don't really think that's viable. There's not that much kicking about. What the Pacific people were calling air forces in the West would probably be little more than an RAF group. So it's probably not big enough to be a standalone module. But having had a look at the island hopping as things start, there's a lot of little ones which we can use as learning scenarios. We're easily going to have 20 or 25 scenarios and modules in the game. So it's going to add a lot of value and replayability. It's a big map area, and it's going to get rid of some of that. Speaking of little things and odd things that come with this, I can't remember looking without going to look. I think Timor is on this map as well as on the Singapore ones, and we're certainly going to give you the partisan campaign that the Australians fought in Timor as part of it. That's a fascinating one, and it's fairly obvious that the Japanese had as little success dealing with partisans as the Germans and Italians did in Yugoslavia. So we'll show that, and we'll create a little scenario from that for you. So that's Watchtower. That's what's going in that box. Now, I've been asked repeatedly what we're going to put out in terms of the next few games. I honestly don't know exactly what's going to happen production-wise. we have had a lot of trouble in the last couple of years. Last 4 years have been hard. But it was my mum being ill or whatever. And if people don't like me looking after my mum, tough. I'm an only child. My dad passed away many years ago. I was the only person there to do it, and I wasn't putting her in a home. I wouldn't expect you guys to put your mum in a home. It's a horrible thing. So, that's done. Julie's dad passed away as well last year, so it's been a bit tough for her too. So we've had a lot to contend with, and the trouble and strife with the printer. You can make up. The guy that was representing him, I'd done business with elsewhere for 10 or 12 years, so I don't quite know what they were playing at. Absolute stupidity. So we are going to deal with that. We already have a new print solution potentially in place. That's not scary. Getting the quality right for them might be tough, but we don't see a problem. So I'm not too worried about that side of things. Obviously, we've concerns about costs. We're very open about that. We're buying high-end stuff. It costs a lot of money to get it done. So buy games. Buy games now. Support them now. Buy as many games as you want. We'll ship them at the price you pay. It's that simple. Pre-order it, because that helps us get the thing to press. And we need a lot of books. We need a lot of time to read them. So for all the fact I maybe wasn't doing quite as much development work in one regard, did a huge amount of research the last couple of years. I've lost count of the number of books I've read on tedious topics I'm not interested in, other than the fact I do this job. So I need to know about some godforsaken island hop in the Pacific, 50 miles up the slot. I wasn't that interested. It's not my cup of tea. I was more interested in learning about Bomber Command or Operation Torch, or operations in the Eastern Front that we didn't know about. That was fascinating. I didn't know a lot of that, and it's stuff that physically interests me, mentally challenges me. So all of that then drives what we need to get out. I'm torn because Blitzkrieg and Mare Nostrum are out press. Blitzkrieg has been outdated since we did Mare Nostrum, frankly. It really needs not a huge update in terms of the OB, but it needs a lot of re-rating done on naval stuff. The map has been massively upgraded. We're extending the game out to 1943 instead of just sort of ending it randomly sometime in early 1941, which I always thought was a bit disappointing. That means we can plug in the U-boat war during its peak. That will be done in sea zone maps. That might actually be quite interesting to play, if somewhat long-winded. We're going to have Poland, we're going to have the invasion of Norway, we're going to have the invasion of the Low Countries and France, and we're going to have options whereby you can change the Allied operations and add more in if you were a bit more prepared. We're going to look at whether the Germans, you've already had the Z plan, but I believe it was a cut down one that we did, because that was the one that was actually authorized by Hitler. But we might try and find some more ships for that. We might try and come up with whereby maybe the Germans have a couple of carriers at the start of the war with 2 more building. The fact that they didn't do that doesn't mean they couldn't have, but there should be some trade-off. When we put in British or American what ifs, it's been based on the principle that we were buying in so much kit, or with so much kit lying about, we could actually have built those as the Western Allies. The Axis are never in that wealthy position. The Germans are better off than any other Axis power, but they're still struggling for total resource base from which they can build stuff. But we can do more, and we will. We're going to have the bomber campaign. We're going to have the Blitz. We're going to have the Battle of Britain. We're going to have Operation Sea Lion. We might well have, in fact, I know we'll have Dieppe. We've got that. And given that, Blitzkrieg probably where it should go, the German attack on Gibraltar, but there's a case to be made that should be in Mare Nostrum, so we might plug it in both. We might say to you, look, Blitzkrieg isn't going to have Spain in it, but most of you have Mare Nostrum or will be buying it. So, or you can use La Guerra map when that's published. That's one of the games that we need to take out the drawer and do a bit more work on. Mostly plugging in unit ratings into an OB. It's actually pretty close. So Blitzkrieg is really exciting for me to reprint it, because I think we can add so much value to the game that makes it worth it. Mare Nostrum, well, the desert's always brilliant. It's great fun. It's a clean war. It's fighting in the blue. It's amazing. And we're going to do all the African stuff. And we're going to show people just how tough it was for everybody to campaign there, because that open southern flank was actually, with stuff going on way south of there. Whether it's the Clerk and so on, taking a fort, but that fort was manned by the Italians about 600 miles south of the Met. So it kind of gives you an idea that that's going to be a really big game in terms of map area. The counter count's going to be about the same as it was originally. I think there might be one more counter sheet going into it. We are going to update stuff. The US Navy should be hanging about after Torch a bit more than it does in the game, or at least parts of it. So you'll see some changes if you've already got it. If you haven't got it, buy it. It's an amazing game. And you can play the Western Desert on a coffee table. It's not, I appreciate Africa's huge, but it's actually nothing like as bad as it looks with 50 odd maps or whatever it is I'm putting in the box this time. Downside of Mare Nostrum is I need a new box design. It just will not fit the box that we have. And trying to get a rigid box made in the UK is a bit expensive, mainly because of the Scottish whisky industry. There are box companies that specialise in it. There are packaging companies out there that do it. I've spoken to about 10 of them down the years, and we hit up against minimum order quantity, which is 10,000. And we ain't going to sell 10,000 Mare Nostrum no matter what. Real sorry, guys. So we need to look at a slightly different box. Don't quite know what we're going to do. I will talk to some clever people I know who are very good at origami with cardboard and see if we can come up with something. So it needs more depth. The area of it's fine, just needs a bit more depth. So instead of it being that, I really need it probably about there. I need it, I won't say crush proof, but crush resistant. And at the moment, that is looking like a challenge. So we may postpone that a little bit longer. Liberation, well, you know what? Normandy's always fun. Invasion of Italy's always fun. Sicily's always good. We're close to, I used to play Europa many, many years ago. We're close to a couple of the best games they did, in my view, there. So it sold well for them. It'll sell well for us, and it's where an awful lot of American service people fought, and I think that deserves to be shown. It's also where the largest Canadian army ever put in the field fought, and again, I think that needs to be shown and respected. The front cover is the Canadians landing in Normandy. That's really exciting for me. I was born in Canada, which not many people know. I never lived there, but that's something that, from a personal standpoint, my neighbour in Glasgow, he actually fought in Normandy in 51st Division. And, Canadian First Army, all that, you can see there's a family connection there, so that's really exciting. And I want to get Vengeance done. I just want it over and done with. That's another 8,000 counter game. So we're kind of torn as to what ones to do and when. Blitz and Liberation together make a lot of sense. It's the same mapping with one or two minor changes. And the changes are the borders where Germany and Italy annexed parts of France and Belgium or whatever. And the same goes in the east. The Vengeance map is the Barbarossa map, but if you look at the Barbarossa maps, you'll see 2 Romania or 2 Hungary. That's flipped. It will be 2 Romania instead of 2 Hungary and vice versa. Right? So all of that we need to change, but that's a few hours work to get that done. So all those games, where are we at with them? Well, they're all in much the same large bowl, whereby minimal research needs to be achieved. Bit more for the Eastern Front than for the West. It's doing the Italian surrender bit, where some Italian units go allied, most of them are disarmed, and a few become the RSI army. We have the RSI army information. I have done a lot of reading on it and some appallingly badly translated books, but I've got a fairly good handle on what's going on. So we can do that pretty easily. That's Liberation. Corey's done the US 8th. He's done the US 9th, he's done the US 12th, I think he's done the 15th as well. So we're kind of in a position where I've got the RAF, I've got the Royal Navy, I've got the US Navy. Corey and I, between us, have got the British Army. We've got the bulk of it. Well, we've got the Italians till they surrender. What we don't have in a file per se is the RSI. We actually have most of the Italian forces that stayed co-belligerent, became co-belligerent, if you like. We've got most of them at least listed. We've got most of the ratings done for that. So liberation from that standpoint isn't too big a deal. I've thought a lot about what scenarios you're going to get in it. You're clearly going to get Sicily. You're going to get Italy and the various assault landings there, smaller scenarios and an Italian campaign up to the fall of Rome. And following the fall of Rome, then there'll be another Italian campaign with an start kicking about somewhere about there that takes you up to the surrender. We will probably do a zoom in, if possible, around around Monte Cassino, but that might not work very well. It will, I think, again, following the purgatory that was doing the partisans for Balkan Fury, we have to do them again. We have to do them from 1943 to the end of the war. So the Balkan partisan campaign, for all Tito's quotes communism, was actually run really through the British and later the Americans. So it would make a whole lot of sense for the Yugoslav campaign to be thrown into the liberation box. Now, I have done, a vast amount of research. Corey has done a bunch of unit ratings. We have an idea of what the partisan army becomes when it becomes the communist Yugoslav army. We know what they got. We know that the Soviets did when their armour and so on got into Yugoslavia. We know that they did give the Yugoslavs some stuff. We don't believe they gave them all that much, because looking at the numbers and published texts, there are more tanks, but you're maybe talking 60 or 70. It looks like they got 1 or 2 brigades of armour. And there are more guns, but it's maybe 2 regiments more guns in total. At no point does the Yugoslav partisan army appear to be fully re-equipped as a heavy force, as a normal, regular force. And there seems to be quite a lot of ill will between Tito's partisans, who are de facto communists, and the Soviet Union as a result. And that blows up after the war, as anyone knows a bit about Yugoslavia can probably tell. So that will be in the box, and there'll probably be 2 or 3 campaigns for that. We will have the assault landing in the south of France, and we'll have Normandy. We'll then have an Operation Cobra, I think it will be, scenario, which will be the start of the breakout, because we kind of know where we're at for that. We will have a Market Garden one, and then we'll have the Ardennes, the Battle of the Bulge. We're going to have then Patton's drive down to Remagen. We'll have the British and Canadian assault crossings of the Rhine under Monty. So those are the big ones. We'll also probably have the end of the submarine war or something. We'll have some naval stuff. There wasn't much, by the way, that went on naval-wise, because the German fleet was essentially tied up in Norway. But there's some what-ifs we can do around that. We can do some learning stuff, so you learn how to use carriers in that, with carrier strikes and turpits. There's quite a few of them. The Royal Navy's carriers were extremely busy hitting German targets up and down Norway in 1944 and 45 when they weren't going to the Pacific. So there's a lot of stuff like that we can look at. I'm sure that there will be some other ideas that people have. We can do some what if the Germans had more assets or more air power or whatever. Although, to be fair to the Germans, despite what people might think, our research indicates they basically moved 80% of their air force into France. So they don't have that much more to give. But we can come up with something there. We can do some what-ifing. We can then look at whether or not the Allies had more shipping. Could maybe have done south of France and Normandy at the same time, or perhaps run south of France at the same time as Normandy, but make Normandy smaller, because that is one solution to do that. We can show that in the game, let you guys have a go at it, and you can tell us, well, that's a good idea or a really dumb idea, it doesn't matter. So that's stuff that's going to go on Liberation. We've done a lot of thinking about it. It will have 20 odd scenarios in total, probably not more than that. The Eastern Front game, Vengeance, right, where do we start with it? Well, we know that the big scenario everyone wants to do is Kursk. We'll do the German retreat out of the Rizev salient if I can find enough information as to what's in 9th Army and 3rd Panzer Army. That should really have gone in Barbarossa. Operation Mars should be in Barbarossa, but we just ran out of time. So we'll try and do something like that for you guys. We'll look at the Russian offensives to liberate, or at least to gain access to Leningrad, and then the various operations against Finland, operations down out the Baltic states. We'll do Bagration. We're going to have the German retrograde across southern Russia. We'll have the fiasco around Yassy, if at all possible, in 1944, where the Germans actually handed the Russians their heads repeatedly in that area. We'll have the collapse of Romania in it, and I've got information to do stuff around Budapest and in Hungary in 1944 and 45, which is actually remarkably balanced. The last one we'll look at is the attack into Berlin. And we might or might not be able to do the attack across the Vistula in eastern Poland. We'll wait and see. I don't know if that's going to be feasible. But it'd be very, very good if we could do that and put the Warsaw Uprising into a game as well, again, to show some respect to the Free Poles and the Polish Home Army's bravery. So we've got a lot planned for that. A lot of thought has gone into it. It's whether or not we can come up with data sets that make sense so that you guys get a decent OB. I can get close from the German data we have. It's a bit difficult to assemble it, and we don't know, particularly non-divisionals, how many of them were destroyed during the various retreats. You know, Bagration gutted a whole chunk Army Group Centre, but a lot of its artillery doesn't seem to die till the end of the war. Not sure. I find it hard to believe that that's the case. But it might be the Germans are able to reassemble some of it. I'm not sure. As I say, well, I'll look again because that has been updated. So maybe we'll do something with that. Kurland is a possibility. So there's a lot in there. It'll be easy to do 20 scenarios, I would imagine, with this. You know, the Crimea, thinking off the top of my head. So as you can see, we have done a lot of digging. We've got a lot of numbers. We've got a lot of information. So we as a business will look at what we think is achievable as fast as possible. Now, when I say as fast as possible, it took me 5 years to do Barbarossa because Corey was very ill for 2 of those years. He could not help. So essentially the game was done by David Hughes, who did the Soviets, and myself, who did everything else. A lot of the base research had been done by Corey previously, but it needed to be revised and brought up to date with new information. That information, as far as we are aware, has not changed, so we can move that forward. Liberation is dear to Corey's heart. I know he wants to give it a huge amount of justice. He is a retired US Army colonel. Of course, he wants it to be amazing because it's also the biggest land campaign that the US has ever fought. A very successful American ground campaign, I hasten to add. So we want to get all of that correct. So any one of those games might take 6 months to a year. To do 2 of them together won't take that much longer, which is why I'm looking at trying to co-release 2, and the 2 that make the most sense are probably Blitzkrieg and Liberation. So I'm going to work on that principle at the moment. I need to negotiate a few things with members of the team to make that happen for you guys. So I hope that shows you we aren't sitting on our backside, we aren't doing nothing. You know, yes, my editing tool in the map work, for example, makes things faster. You might take 6 years, because I know that's what it took some of my competitors using InDesign and Illustrator and whatever else to create maps. And this cuts that down, but it might be 6 months work to generate one of these maps, the standard that I would put out in one of my games. We're not at that point. Most of that has been done, but there's at least 2 or 3 weeks to get Europe right, and there's at least, I would say, 2 months hard work on the Pacific, and that does not include the whole of China. That would only be those bits of China that are on map in one of the games that's coming out, which will be I Shall Return, which will have a corner of China in it. But really, there has to be a map of China. So one of my thoughts this year is to get that done, because that brings the China incident from a nebulous idea to actually that's a viable product. We've got the map. We've got a lot of information about the Chinese army. We've got a lot of information about the Japanese. We can put together a viable game that does 1937 to 45 fairly easily and looks at the Civil War pretty easily as well. So on that point, if you want a specific game, email us. info@tkc-games.com. Just email us. If everybody wants vengeance, we'll do vengeance. We might not agree with you, but we'll do it. If everybody wants Blitzkrieg, we'll do it. Nobody wants Mare Nostrum, we won't do it for a while. If everyone wants the China incident, once we finish crying and we've bought a copious supply of some form of alcohol, we'll get that out the door. But I'd rather do it through the path of not necessarily least resistance, but the most common sense way of doing stuff, where the work's already done, additional work can go on behind the scenes by other people while I get all the artwork done and get it ready to go to a printer. So I will repeat time and time again, thank you so much for the support. We don't always appreciate some of the comments, but then again, you probably don't appreciate our honesty at times. We really appreciate all the positivity out there. Buy lots of games. We really need the sales. Like every business, we rely upon turnover. Trust us when we say we've got print fixed or on the way of being fixed. Enjoy the titles you've got. Spread the good news. Have a great week or two. I'll try and get this put up fairly quickly. So you all get this news very soon. We will be updating Facebook at the weekend or beginning of next week. I don't quite know when, because I need progress. I don't see any point in wasting anyone's time. It's been a huge amount of work, as I'm sure you've worked out. Have a great one. We'll talk about World War I next time. I will get a certain Jeff on board. Have a good one. Take care, guys. Wonderful talking to you. And like, subscribe, comment down below, as usual. Take care. Bye-bye.